This narrated slideshow is part of a series of short videos dealing with dynamic definitions of various New Testament words. It is presented by Jim Fowler of Christ in You Ministries. This study will consider the phrase, the image of God. The initial record of the creation of human beings in the first chapter of Genesis reads, God said, "Let us make man in our image, according to our likeness." And God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. What does it mean that man was created in the image of God? Students of the Bible have debated the meaning of the imago Dei, which is Latin for the image of God, for thousands of years. They have usually sought to identify some trait or function of human beings that is like God. Some Christians have suggested that since God is a Trinity, man, like God, has three parts or functions: spirit and soul and body. Others note that God is spirit, and like God, man is a spirit being with spiritual capacity. Another suggestion is that God is a reasonable God, and man has a rational mind, like God. God is love, point out others, and like God, man has the ability for loving affection. As God has dominion over all creation, he gave humans the right and power to have dominion over all other created beings, is the position of others. The will of God is the basis for volitional decision-making of human will, assert others. God is a social and relational God, and made man a social and relational being, say others. God is the source of all moral behavior and created human beings as moral beings like himself. And still others say that, like God, man is immortal and will live forever. What is the problem with these interpretations of the image of God? They are all humanistic explanations of how man is allegedly like God. You will remember that it was the serpent in the garden who suggested that man could be like God. The Christian faith has always recognized the essential distinction between God and man, between the Creator and the creature, and recognize that what God is, only God is. God created human beings as derivative and receptive creatures who were designed to receive character function from God. The image of God is not something about man that is like God, but instead is God's desire to make himself visible in the highest creature of his earthly creation. A functional, rather than substantive perspective of the image of God allows us to understand that God's intent that his invisible character should be made visible in his human creatures as they receive such by faith the receptivity of his activity. The original biblical words for image were in the Hebrew tselem and in the Greek icon, and both convey the concept of visible impression or expression. God is invisible, we're told in Romans 1:20 and 1 Timothy 1:17, and no man hath seen God at any time, we find in John 1:18 and 1 John 4:12. So the visibility of God's image must come in the functionality and receptivity and the derivation of the expression of his character in human behavior. The image of God is a derived image, as people allow for the visible expression of the invisible character of God in human behavior. Now we've just said that God is invisible, and no man hath seen God at any time. Jesus Christ, however, is said to be the image of God in Colossians 1:15 and 2 Corinthians 4:4. And for every moment in time, for 33 years, Jesus was receptive by faith to allow the invisible character of God to be made visible in human behavior. He was man as God intended, the perfect man. Human beings lost the possibility of imaging the character of God after the fall of man into sin, for they were without God, Ephesians 2:12. And only by the redemptive and restorative work of Jesus Christ can human beings once again receive the divine presence into their spirit and put on the new man who's being renewed to true knowledge according to the image of the one who created him. See Colossians 3:10 and Ephesians 4:24. In the words of Major W. Ian Thomas, man was created in such a way that he could bear the image of God without God actually becoming visible. But in the fall of man into sin, that which was designed by God to bear the divine image was prostituted by the devil to become the means whereby man could bear the satanic image. And here again we see that man derives what he does from either God or Satan, and manifests a derived image of either the character of God or the character of evil. Christians are predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, Romans 8:29, and are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, 2 Corinthians 3:18. For an individual to bear the image of God requires the presence of God in a human person, with the dynamic function of Christ through that person, thereby allowing for derived image expression of the invisible and all-glorious character of God.